Hey Summoners, welcome back to another Wild Rift video. My name is Kangas, and today I'll be teaching you everything you need to know before you start your first game as support. If you're confused or worried about playing the role, don't worry. We're here to help you understand all the basics. Our question of the day is, what are some of the things you're struggling with while playing Wild Rift? We'd be more than happy to help with anything regarding Wild Rift, so ask away. With that being said, let's get started with the video. Let's start off by speaking the true facts. Supports are the unsung heroes of Wild Rift. In other MOBA games, support is often the least picked role in the entire game. Everyone wants to be the center of attention, so supporting doesn't seem satisfying to most players, but that is completely different in Wild Rift. While you aren't the main source of damage on your team, you're the reason everyone is able to do damage in the first place. When you're playing Janna, you're the one keeping the fight going, making sure the enemies are having a terrible time trying to reach your allies. Alistar can lock down enemies for ages, starting insane combos that your team can follow up on to do massive damage and win the game. Let me be clear, supporting is not easy. In a game like Wild Rift, where the action is high and there's fighting all over the place, it's crucial that you understand the flow of battle. Support champions tend to have abilities with multiple uses, giving you options and chances to really outplay your opponents. Good supports are like the solid backbone to your team. When the backbone is strong, everything just works, and the team can confidently push their way to victory. When the backbone is weak, people will fall out of position and die at the worst times. If anything I just said excites you, support might be the role for you. If not, I still think you should give it a try. There'll be videos for every role in Wild Rift, so feel free to check them out to find out which role is the perfect fit for you. As a support, your designated lane is the dragon lane, since you're going to want your strongest damage dealers near the dragon. If you're on the blue side, you'll go to the bottom lane. If you're on the red side, you'll go to the top lane. There are markers that will point you into every lane, so pay attention to those if you feel lost. The coolest part about the dragon lane is that it's always going to be a 2v2 lane. As a support, you'll generally be paired with a marksman like Ashe or Varus. Playing with an ally can be fun and frustrating at the same time. Every player plays different, meaning that no two Ashe players will play exactly the same. It'll be on both of you to work together to secure a victory for your team. When you first start playing support, every game will feel totally different. Keeping an open mind is crucial to becoming a good support. You'll need to learn how to adapt to any player, just as your marksman will need to adapt to you. This always keeps the lane exciting and fresh, so have fun with it. If you find a player you particularly enjoyed playing with, try adding them and queue up together. You might even make a friend. Speaking of duos, you're the protector of the pair. It's the support's job to make sure their AD carry can farm minions safely and effectively. As the game progresses, your duty as protector is a bit more flexible, depending on what champion you're playing. To make things easy, let's talk about the two major categories of supports, tanks and mages. Tank supports are beefy, durable, close-range champions that use crowd control, or CC, to keep enemies in place and protect their allies. For example, Braum can slow, stun, and knock up enemies to make sure they aren't doing damage to your team. Blitzcrank can pull an enemy carry right into your team, separating them from their team and making it easy to kill them. Mage supports, on the other hand, are squishier champions that rely on assisting from farther away to provide major survivability to the rest of their team. They give their team things like shields, heals, movement speed, and knockbacks. For example, Nami uses her abilities to empower her allies' attacks and heal them while damaging and slowing enemies at the same time. Soraka's ultimate is a global heal ability that gives every single champion on her team an instant heal, changing the tides of battle anywhere at any time. When you start learning a role, it's best to stick with one or two champions. This way, you'll be able to get comfortable with a champion while learning everything that you can about the role. If you switch champions too often, it can be hard to learn the role and the champion at the same time. It doesn't matter if you pick a tank or a mage support first, so pick who you think looks the most fun. Now that we understand what kind of champions fill the support role, let's get started on the basics of gameplay. We're going to divide an average game of Wild Rift into 3 sections: early game, mid game, and late game. Early game can be best described as the time spent from the start of the game until the first turret falls. This usually happens between the 5 and 7 minute mark. For supports, the early game focuses on the laning phase, meaning your 2v2 dragon lane. Mid game happens right after the first turret falls. This usually happens from the 7 minute mark until the 13 minute mark. For supports, the goal of the mid game is to transition your duo strength and try to take the dragon. After that, you want to move with your marksman and start pushing whatever lane still has their first turret up. Late game is usually determined by your entire team grouping to take down major objectives like the enemy Nexus turrets and Baron Nashor. This can last from the 13-minute mark up until the end of the game. As a support, this is when your ability to protect your team and lock down important targets really starts to shine. Okay, let's talk about the early game some more. Laning and matchups are all about experience. Some champions are very strong early on and start to get weaker later in the game, while others are the exact opposite. This applies to every role, including support. We don't have the time to talk about every champion right now, so let's talk about your goals as both a tank and a mage. As a tank support, try your best not to get poked down by the enemy champions in lane. You want to wait until you get at least 2 of your abilities before you start to look for fights. When you hit level 2 and 3, try and lock down the enemy marksman so that you and your teammates can deal some damage. Turrets are very strong early game, so try to never fight under their turret unless you want an early gray screen trip back to your base. As a mage support, help your ally by harassing the enemy marksman. You want to make their life as hard as possible, so do your best to poke them with your abilities and auto attacks. If you're facing a tank support like Blitzcrank, try not to play too aggressively. If you get locked down, your chances of survival are slim. Once the first turret gets knocked down, both teams will start to look for fights in places outside of lane. Mid-game is usually my favorite part, since this is when you'll finally be able to interact with all the other champions in-game. As a support, you should make it a habit to ask yourself a few questions. First, who do I need to protect on my team? This might seem like a no-brainer, but you need to remember that there's 5 champions on a team. As a support, you always want to protect your marksman partner. However, there are times when you'll need to protect your mid laner as well. Keep in mind who is strongest on the team by seeing who has the most kills and make sure to keep them alive. Next, ask yourself, how do I win a fight? For a mage support, your goal is to protect your carries most of the time. As a tank support, you're often able to start fights on your own. Don't be afraid to lock down an enemy if you see them far away from their team. Finally, ask yourself, which lane do we need to push? Your priority should be to destroy all 3 of the outer turrets. Move around the map with your marksman to siege turrets and gain a gold advantage for your team. Dragon is a major part of the mid game, spawning at 6 minutes every single time. This should be your team's #1 priority, since the dragon gives you permanent buffs for the entire team. Make sure you remember what your job is and get ready to teamfight. Late game can be a tense time for both teams. Usually the game only reaches this point if both teams are evenly matched, so you should be proud that you've made it this far. As a support, there's a few things you want to focus on. Remind yourself that keeping your team safe is the most important thing. However, late game has 5-on-5 showdowns, usually around the Baron Nashor side of the map. Fights can get really hectic, so do your best to keep your cool. If you're a support with some really powerful CC like Nami's Bubble or Blitzcrank's Hook, look out for enemies that are out of position and try and aim for them. If you can catch someone out of position, your team can easily win the teamfight, securing your Baron and probably the game. And that pretty much wraps up the basics of playing support. Try not to worry about the more detailed parts of the game like item builds and runes just yet. Riot provides some really solid suggestions for both of these, so just follow along and purchase the items that are shown to you when you return to base. We hope this beginner's guide was useful for all of you aspiring support players out there. Once you start to understand how to play one type of support, you can try and learn the other. If you aren't sure who to play as your first support, I've got you covered. Soraka and Janna are very powerful mage supports that start off easy but have a really high skill ceiling. The same can be said about Alistar and Blitzcrank. They're 2 tanky supports that are definitely worth learning. Check out our 10 best champions for beginners video to see some other solid options. Thanks so much for watching. We're really excited to help players start experiencing Wild Rift. Don't forget to answer the question of the day in the comments so that we can figure out the best way to help you all. We're planning to come out with a bunch of guides, so subscribe to our channel if you don't want to miss out. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.